Cool. I'm a little bit nervous. I'm actually more nervous I'm more nervous than when I'm talking up students.
Why is
When I'm talking up students, I get into like a kind of like closed off like Zen mode.
mm,
Like, all right, got to talk about myself for a little bit. Like, we'll see.
Oh, don't be nervous, dude. This is it, man. This is we'll just call this a start. It's just a conversation. And that's what I try to tell most people, it's like I don't know, there's no reason to be nervous. But yeah, Jonathan Eisele, thanks. I appreciate you coming on, man. Coming on the podcast. For those that may not know you, you and I served together on the 215. What was it? Security Force Advise and Assist teams, the advisor teams.
Call sign Guinness.
Call sign Guinness for sure. Yeah, and we were in Sangin in 2013 together and stuff like that. Before that, you're a Marine officer and a logistics officer. I think you went through a logistics officer, and I think we pulled you from truck company, correct?
Yes, yeah. So I was at Truck Company, 2nd Marine Division with Headquarters Battalion, and I was a logistician by trade, but they had me on the advisor team as a personnel advisor.
Oh, really?
It came up where they needed an O1 or O2, and it's like, does anybody want to go to Afghanistan? I was like, where are we going? Like,
yeah.
So I was the combat edge for the team.
I didn't realize that actually. That's funny. Let's back up though, because when you join, you're from Wisconsin, and you have your whole family and like your whole community is all into flying and stuff, right?
Yeah. So I live in Oshkosh, Wisconsin now. I hate admitting this, but I'm actually originally from Chicago. Grew up as a lifelong Packer fan in Chicago, so good luck figuring that one out. But yeah, flying's in my blood. I've been flying for as long as I can remember. My grandfather was a pilot and a flight instructor. He was actually, when he retired, he did 32 years with the FAA. And when he retired, he was the deputy chief for general aviation in the United States. And he raised my father as a pilot, and my father raised me as a pilot. And in fact, when I was born, my dad took my blank logbook to the hospital and put my baby feet in ink and put them on the front page of the logbook. I had my first logged flight at 3 months old. So I've really grown up in aviation. It's always been the biggest part of my life.
I did not, excuse me, had some water go down the wrong pipe. I did not realize I did not realize about the massive air show in Wisconsin till we met.
Yeah.
And you guys are really involved in that as well. Do you want to explain what that is?
It's a big deal. You haven't been yet, have you?
I have not.
You would freaking love it. But yeah, it's the AirVenture Air Show in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. It's the biggest air show in the world. I would say rivaled only by probably the Paris Air Show in Sun and Fun in Lakeland, Florida. But it's the Super Bowl of all aviation events. There are 10,000 aircraft that fly in, everything from C-130s and F-18s to Piper Cubs and paramotors and private Cirrus airplanes. If it flies, it's showing up to Oshkosh, and it's a week long. I think the attendance last year was probably upwards of probably 650,000 for the week. So it's a really big deal, and I've attended the air show every year of my life and volunteered in some capacity since I was about 10 years old. And interestingly enough, the first AirVenture I was supposed to miss was supposed to be the year that we deployed, because this takes place the last week of July. And we thought we were coming home and we thought we were going to do a whole year over there. I think we were supposed to stay through February. So when we found out in early July that we were coming home early, I actually didn't tell my family. They were still not expecting to see me at Oshkosh. So I was still posting photos of, Afghanistan to my Facebook page, and I had a friend pick me up from Milwaukee Airport, and I surprised my family at Oshkosh. So my record is still unbroken, including the year that my mom was pregnant with me. So
that's pretty crazy, man. That's a good record. And I bet that's one of those moments, people always record them and put them on social media, but think actually doing that, I bet that just blew your family away.
Oh, absolutely. And especially because it's such a big event for my entire family. Like, it's more important to us than Christmas and Thanksgiving and New Year's and everyone's birthdays all wrapped up. So to come back early was a big deal for them, but for me to come back to that event was an even bigger deal.
For sure.
Yeah.
So obviously, I would say you probably joined to be a pilot, correct? Sorry, I had some feedback. So you probably joined to be a pilot. Let's talk about that, like how all that works. Were you a contract flight school guy, or was that just something you were aspiring to do? And you can tell us kind of how the big green weenie will get you sometimes.
Yeah. So it's a long story, bottom line up front, really comes down to me being in the wrong place at the wrong time and having, bad luck and worse timing. But I, for my entire life, wanted to grow up and become a Marine Corps aviator. And I really wanted to fly F-18s more than anything. But I would have been happy with anything that the Marine Corps stuck me in. And, going to this air show at Oshkosh, you'd get these Marine Harriers and F-18s that would taxi onto the ramp. And I'd always be the first one there to greet the pilot when he was coming down from the ladder. And they'd always do cool shit, like rip off a patch from their flight suit and give it to me. And that was my early inspiration to want to become not only a pilot, but also a Marine Corps aviator. So I really committed my whole life to pursuing that. It's why I, played football and wrestled and played lacrosse in college. So I wanted to toughen myself so I could, do that. And then I went to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Daytona Beach, Florida, which is also where I met Grant Morrison, Emilio, who I know has been on your show too.
He has been, yes. Good dude.
Yeah, awesome dude. But I went to Embry-Riddle. I enrolled in PLC, which is like the non-ROTC path to commissioning in the Marine Corps. Had a flight contract through PLC while I was also competing for a NROTC scholarship. I went to OCS between my freshman and sophomore summer on a flight contract, got back from OCS, and NROTC was like, hey, we'll give you a scholarship. Only catch is you got to reapply for your flight physical, but it's no big deal. You've already passed your flight physical. You've already passed all your tests, and there are flight slots available. Like, this is just an administrative step. I was like, cool, I'll take 3 more years of school and, finish all my flight training on the government dime. That sounds perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So I went back to get my flight physical, and I no longer met the vision standards. And I learned that when I went through before and got the flight contract, it was on a contact waiver, which was no longer offered. So they said, no big deal, just go get PRKI surgery, come back, and I think there had to be like 7 months or something like that had elapsed between the time that I got the surgery and could reapply. So I got the surgery, reapplied, and then probably a year went by as my paperwork was still being processed. And with the rules for NROTC, you can only contract, or at least back then, you could only contract for aviation before beginning your senior year. So my senior year began, I was locked into a ground contract. I was like, all right, well, this is not ideal, but I still wanted to be a Marine Corps officer first. And I can still, compete for this at TBS. When I got to TBS, there were, I think, probably 240 something lieutenants in our class. And there were about 40 lieutenants competing for one flight contract. I volunteered to be the company air rep because I wanted to know exactly who I was competing against, and I wanted to know exactly what the standards were. I wanted the inside scoop to give myself like every advantage that I could. So there was a day that came up. They were like, hey, anyone who believes they're uniquely qualified for any MOS, please, let us know why, make a case, and we'll, consider that. And I was like, hey, well, I have a commercial pilot's license, multi-engine instrument rating, and a degree in aeronautical science from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. They were like, that's great. How much money has the Marine Corps spent on you? I was like, well, technically it was the Department of the Navy that paid for my scholarship. But they're like, yeah, but this wasn't a Marine Corps official school, was it? I was like, no. They're like, well, NAMI, I believe that's like the Naval Air Medical Institute, tells us that the only predictor for success at flight school is the aviation selective test battery scores. Therefore, that's the only criteria that we are judging on. And the guy that beat me for the flight contract, like, scored like 1 point higher than I did in like the math portion, and had only soloed like a plane like once, So I was like, all right, well, if you guys think that he's better cut out for flight school than I am, like, so be it. Still going to keep applying. So after that, the only way to contract to lat move over to become an aviator in the Marine Corps is to apply for the Field Accession Board, which convenes once a year, and they typically only have about 1 to 2 flight contracts that are open. They had stipulations, like you had to have, I forget exactly what it was, but it was like a minimum 1.5 year time on station, and you need to be career designated, and you needed to have at least, like, I think it was another year remaining on station in order to compete for this contract. So I had to let some time go by. I actually submitted my first package for this in 2013 when we were still in Afghanistan. And I wasn't yet career designated. I didn't yet have a 1.5 year time on station, but I was like, hey guys, if this gets rejected, like, you can count on me reapplying next year. So it got rejected. And then the next year I had letters of recommendation from the battalion commander of 3-2. I had a personal letter of rec from the 2nd MARDIV CG, from the 2nd MA CG, and I even had a buddy that was a CH-53 instructor pilot go up with me in a Cessna and do a whole synopsis of my flight. He basically said, like, look, this guy's doing just as good, if not slightly better, than most of my wing naval aviators. Like, it'd be foolish not to select him for this. Like, he's clearly cut out for it. And the Marine Corps said no. And I, don't know why. So I was kind of at a point in my career where it's like, I can get out, or I can keep trying to reapply for this. And I told my monitor that I actually wanted to remain on station and, pass up my next set of orders if possible, so I could compete for this a final time. And he's like, if you do that, you're going to be screwing yourself as a logistics officer in your career progression, right? I was like, yeah, I get that, but I'm really gambling on the fact that I'm going to get this flight contract. And so submitted it for my 3rd time, didn't get it either. And, the only sense that I can make out of this whole thing is I can look back on it, with a clear heart and say, I did absolutely everything within my power. And at the end of the day, I just believe God didn't want me being a Marine Corps aviator.
What a bummer, man. I mean, I remember us being in Afghanistan and you talking about it and how you were going to reapply and all that stuff. And I'm like, man, that sucks, because I was a lat mover. I came into the Marine Corps not doing a job I wanted to do, And
for T, right?
Yeah, I was a motor T mechanic for 3 years, and I was just like, this isn't why I joined, So I could totally relate to that, dude. What a fucking bummer. I think we do a poor job of taking. I've mentioned this on the podcast multiple times now, and I've asked a few guys that were officers. If you want to answer this, you can. But the question is, like, do we still think that a degree should be required to become a Marine Corps officer? And let me put some context to that is, imagine someone that gets out of high school and they go straight into the trades, and now they've been working as like a construction person for 4 years or something like that. Are we saying that person is in a uniquely qualified position to go and work with like a CLB and be part of a logistics unit and do that kind of thing? Like, why do we throw away that kind of experience? How many flight hours did you have before you even joined the Marine Corps?
At the time, it was probably around like 400 or 500. And, the only reason at the time, like when I graduated college, everyone was telling me, they're like, look, you really need to get your CFI rating, certificated flight instructor. And I was like, no, I don't have any reason to waste my time or money on that right now. Like, the Marine Corps is going to, make me a better pilot. Like, that's just on the other side of the road. Like, so yeah, I don't know how much more I could have done to make myself more competitive, but, I think it all works out. And that's really, something that I've learned to kind of embrace throughout the years. Like, life is messy. It's unpredictable. It's tough. Things don't always go according to plan. But I think it was Shakespeare that said, there is nothing either good nor bad, but thinking makes it so. And I think that like I've just kind of learned to use those events. It's like, yeah, it really sucks that it didn't work out, but if
Just
it
wasn't
did
meant to
work,
be.
I wouldn't be here today. You know, I wouldn't be doing something that I really love, which is instruction. So
Had you ever considered getting out and like going to the Army and flying Apaches under the Warrant Officer program, or maybe I don't know how it works to transfer to the Air Force if that's even a feasible option? You know.
yeah. Yeah, so I've actually had a lot of people tell me, they're like, John, you need to quit what you're doing right now and join the Army and go fly helicopters as a warrant officer. You'd be good at it. You'd fucking love it. And I was like, look, I have no doubt about that. But it's just, you know, I'm having too much fun as a paramotor instructor right now. And I really do kind of feel like when I left the Marine Corps, which is all I ever wanted to do when I became a Marine Corps officer, like I checked that military box. And when I got out, I just found like the mental jump to like go back into the military to just like not align with where I had headed in life at that. I mean, it was just like when I left the Marine Corps, like I made a decision to leave the military for good.
Yeah.
You know, does that make sense?
Oh, 100%, man. 100%. I've had a lot of people hit me up for the years that I got out, especially right after I got out. And even, I mean, up to this year, it's been 4 years now. I've had multiple people reach out to me about doing contracting gigs and doing fire support and even ones that are stateside as an instructor. And I'm like, dude, I just don't want to do it anymore, man. Like, I feel like I just need to break away and do something else, you know? Like, I do the podcast, which keeps me like in the military, like mindset anyway, or whatever, or not military mindset, but like with what's going on and people's experiences. And I do this because
and I think that's really healthy, by the way. Like, I think it's really good for us to all be plugged into some type of veteran community, whether it's like the VFW or chatting with friends or whatever. Like, I think that's important for all of us.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I 100% agree. I always tell guys, reach out to someone, get involved with a group or something like that. Like, that's way better than sitting around thinking about the glory days and being upset that shit maybe didn't work out, or maybe you're not as cool as you used to be, or whatever, you know. Like, get involved with something. The podcast was like as a little kid, I was all into the military. That's all I watched as a little kid, was like the old school war movies. My dad was in the Army. I remember as a little kid watching him go off to the Gulf War, and I was like, oh man, you know. So me doing the podcast is just because it's something that interests me. But then me going and doing like the contract work, I'm looking at it like, is there really a career in that? Like, how long is that going to last? Because the contract is as long, you know, it's only guaranteed as long as the contract is guaranteed. And then it could get cut at any time, you know? And I was like, I think I need to go and get a civilian job, like work in like a real job and start, because what if a contract ends and I'm like 45 or something like that? Now what am I going to do? Start over, you know, as trying to get a regular job being that old? And you know, I can, but that doesn't sound like a good idea. So I know what you're saying, man. When you step out, some guys can't think that way though. And those are the ones I think you see that come back in, you know, or want to come back in. They miss that, which I think we all kind of do. We miss that kind of discipline, esprit de corps, you know, rah, you know, a lot of it's bullshit and stuff when you're in and you're annoyed by a lot of stuff, but there's so much cool stuff that comes along with it.
Yeah. And I think like, you know, especially, you know, I felt this when we were deployed. Every day that I spent in the Marine Corps, even if it was a really shitty day, like there was an undeniable purpose to each and every day.
Oh, for sure.
Deployed. And I think that like when people get out and they lose that everyday purpose that they took for granted, they might not have even realized that they had it. Like that becomes a hole in their life that they try and fill with something, you know. And I think it's fill that hole with healthy things.
Well, yeah, and you know the other thing too is not only do you have a job or whatever you're doing, you feel like there's a mission, there's a goal, like we're working towards something, but you're so close to the people you're around because you live with them, you eat with them, you sleep with them, you work with them, you go PT with them, you do everything with them, and then when you get out, you go back home to your family. But who spends that much time with their family? No one.
Yeah. And I think that was one of the things that was also really cool about, you know, the team that you and I were on, is that we had a mix of staff and officers and younger enlisted Marines and younger sailors, you know, that were on the team. But like rank really didn't matter too much for our team. Like it was a really like close knit, like fun little family that we had. Like it was it was a good team.
Yeah, we had good dynamics. We
Yeah.
had really good dynamics. I couldn't complain, especially when I got orders to the advisor team and I went to go check in to whatever it was called, the advisor training.
Yeah, I think it was like ATC or ATG or something.
ATG, yeah, advisor training group. When I checked in there, I remember like talking to one of the other JTACs, and they're like, "Bro, you're not doing any JTAC shit." He's like, "I'm a machine gunner on a fucking truck, and I'm a whatever advisor. Like, they don't want me to do anything." And I'm like, and I had multiple guys tell me that no one cared. They're like, that's not even a priority. So I made it a point to make sure, like, hey man, my job here is to be the JTAC and the fire support guy. All the other shit, I'll help out as I can. But this is literally, I'm the only one too. I'm the only guy on the team that can do it. There was no JFOs or anything like that.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. That helped me out. That Major Mulvihill, our team leader, he had my back on that, because I remember what's his name, the S4 officer. He's like, "Oh, you used to be Motor T? You could be my 4 Alpha," and I'm like, "No, no way, bro." I was like, I got away from that shit. This is not, yeah.
Yeah, good decision there. But yeah, I really feel like it's really important for people to find that purpose again once they get out. And I really think that, for me, I've found that purpose in paramotoring. And, one of the things that happened very quickly after I got out, I realized like how much autonomy I had all of a sudden. And everyone jokes about like you go back to SIF and like you get your brain back, but it's really true. And, I think that for most of like my young adult life, I was, taught how to walk and how to talk and how to think and how to color inside of the lines, like whether it was, a logistics procedure or standard operating procedures or a checklist on an airplane. Everything was like staying inside of the lines and, doing as you're told, right? Staying inside the lane. And like when I got out of the Marine Corps, I realized that like I'm now responsible for my own destiny at this point. And I think that was just like a really cool transition. It's like I never realized how much freedom I actually had. And I just think that that's probably something that most people that haven't served in the military wouldn't necessarily understand,
Yeah, I was in a unique position. Like I said, my dad served in the military. So when I joined, I was like, dude, they own me. Like, whatever. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I'm sick and they tell me I got to come in. It doesn't matter if they say come in at 3 a.m. with fucking whatever on. It could be freezing ass cold. You're wearing shorts and t-shirt, bro. 3 a.m. Be here. Doesn't matter. They don't care. And I better not say anything back either, because then it's going to be an issue.
Yeah.
It's like it's an accountability thing, and you count on people. Again, there's a lot of dumb shit that we could all do without, and that we all like look back on like, man, that was dumb, Yeah. But that camaraderie that you build with like so and so consistently is here. I can count on so and so. Like he's literally, it's just a different world. You're right. And being on the outside, people can't understand that. And guys getting out have an issue when no one's held accountable anymore.
Yeah.
Like you can get fired from your job, but I don't know. There's just it's not like it is in the military. It's just a different world,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I remember, like shortly after I had gotten out, probably about a year after I'd gotten out, I connected with some friends from church. We went out to like Chipotle after church and got some food, and I had like this weird like out of body experience. I was like, where am I? Like, what am I doing? Like, I don't even know these people. Like, they have nothing in common with me. Like, they don't understand about like anything that I've gone through over the last few years. And it was just like such a weird like culture shock moment that kind of came out of nowhere, if that makes sense.
No, 100%. It's I've talked about it with my buddy Michael Farrell that's come on the podcast. We've been to so many different countries, not just like Iraq and Afghanistan. Like he was on the 31st MEU and shit like that. He was in Okinawa, so he went to a bunch of countries. And then when I went on the 2 MEUs after our deployment, I got to go to freaking all over the place. Oman, freaking Saudi Arabia, Hong Kong, Singapore, Malaysia, And it's like, who do you know back home that's ever done anything like that? And how do you sit down and talk to them about... me and Michael were talking about how you don't talk about it because you feel like you're bragging. You know what I'm saying? You're like the one-up guy. You become the guy. Oh, good. Tell us another story about when you were in the military, bro. Like no one cared, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's exactly that. No, so I totally understand what you're saying, and that's how it feels sometimes. And I don't know, maybe we feel like that and we shouldn't. You know, maybe people do want to hear about the stuff, but it's just I don't know. It sucks coming off like that.
And I feel like most veterans, at least most veterans that I know, like generally don't want the recognition either. Like they're like, I didn't do anything. Like, you know, I was a logistics officer. I was like motor T. Like, you're welcome for my service, but that's not why I did it. You know, like they don't want to talk about themselves generally either. And like, I feel like within our community, like we kind of self-regulate each other too, because we'd probably give that person a lot of shit if he did. You know?
Like cool story, bro.
Yeah.
Cool freaking story, man.
Yeah.
Back in my day.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I don't know, but it's good though that people get out and talk about it, and like guys coming on the podcast, you know, a lot of dudes tell me afterwards how much they remember. They're like, "Oh shit, you know, I hadn't thought about this in forever," and it just like kicked up so many memories and stuff like that. So I'm hoping people listening to it have that same experience, because you know that's invaluable. You know, you got to remember the good times, remember all that stuff, and then like take those memories and reach out to the people that were there with you. That's what I always tell people. Reach out to those people and be like, "Hey, what's up, man? Hope you're doing well." You know, it could be as simple as that. They may respond, they may not. Who knows? But
absolutely,
yeah. Let's talk about. So you were with Truck Company. What does Truck Company do? What is that like? Is it just drive?
Yeah. Basically, they provide motor vehicle support to the 2nd Marine Division and all of the respective battalions and regiments that need the support. And you know, if 3-2 were doing a machine gun range and they needed ammunition drivers and they needed Humvees and they needed like troop support, like they'd put that request in to the headquarters battalion 4, and that 4 would send that request over to Truck Company operations. So comm support or comm company at headquarters battalion works very much the same way, where they just provide communication support to headquarters battalion, which is actually where I finished. I was in the comm support section over at Truck Company over at headquarters battalion after I'd extended on station. They're like, well, we're just going to put you over to another building so other lieutenants can get some, you know, experience as the Truck Company operations officer, XO. And that was a really fun gig. I really liked that. I had a really small, close-knit team, and we were providing basically, you know, comm support and that's what I'm looking for here, like generator support over to, you know, all their exercises that they did. So that was a fun gig to do for a little bit. Yeah.
How long were you there before you got tapped to do the advisor team?
I want to say it was probably about a year to a year and a half or so. Yeah. In that time, I was like the operations officer for Truck Company, and also was like the XO for a short period of time before I got tapped for that.
So, I mean, were you pretty pumped though? You know, you were like, "Oh shit!" Did you know it was going to be an advisor team, or were you just putting your hand up for like, "Hey, there's an appointment coming up"?
I just put my hand up initially, and then I asked questions later, basically.
Yeah.
And I found out that it was an advisor team, and I was like, "All right, this is going to be pretty freaking cool. Like, this is why I joined the Marine Corps. This is why I wanted to be a Marine Corps officer more than a pilot." Rather than just, you know, flying in the Air Force or anything like that. So that's, you know, I think most Marines are probably that way too. Like, they joined to deploy. They joined because they wanted to go to combat.
Yeah, and that's a unique experience for a Lago. You know, like you're getting to go, because I deployed as a mechanic with MLG. You know, you're sending out, what is it, CLB 25 or whatever it was. That's a cool deployment, I guess, if you want to sit on the base and do the same job you're doing at Camp Lejeune. But this is completely different. This is taking you out of your like normal comfort zone and like introducing a lot of new stuff to you.
Yeah. And, you know, just the like personnel administration stuff aside, because that was a whole learning curve. I had to learn a little bit like how to be an adj on the fly. But there were just so many cool things that I got to do as a first lieutenant that like no officer or junior officer would get to do otherwise. Like I remember that I was one of the gunners for our MAT Vs, and I remember coming back at night, like down, what was it? It was 611, right?
Mm-hmm.
That highway. So we were coming south down 611 back into the bazaar, and it was night, and I had my MVGs on, and like I had my aiming device on, and like we had Cobras. It was like a section of Cobras that like followed us back. And I remember like being in this moment, being like, "This is it. Like this is as cool as I'm ever gonna fucking be. Like this, like." So yeah, it was a very very unique opportunity. So,
yeah, for sure. I mean, even at first we all hated the like initial advisor training because it initially it was like going through MCT. You know, like this is a night vision device. Here's how you put the batteries in it. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Like our lowest ranking person on our team's a corporal. I think we all know, you know. But I guess you gotta plan for the lowest common denominator and start from there. But once we moved on and started to do some like decent training, it wasn't too bad. Like the language training was tough for me, but like working with the role players I think went really well. Being out in 29 Palms and doing a lot of shooting out there. I mean, fuck, we got to shoot what? AKs, Dragonovs, like all kinds of stuff out there. The PKMs.
Yeah.
You know?
I think I shot like 5,000 rounds out of the 50 cal. Like how else can you get that experience as a first lieutenant? You know, like
I remember one of the guys passing off his like pistol rounds because he was just tired of shooting. I'm like, bro, you know how much ammo costs right now? Fucking, I'll take them. Like I'm gonna shoot as much as the Marine Corps will let me. You know what I'm saying?
Totally.
Old Jazzy Hands, the instructor out there, Jazz Hands.
Yeah. I felt really prepared with the training that they gave us over at 29 Palms, and I really feel like the live tissue training was probably like the most valuable training that we got. Like, unfortunately, we never had to really put that stuff to use. But I remember like thinking, even after the training, like, how am I really going to react the first time I see like a grievous, like nasty injury? Like, you don't really know until you're in that situation. And I remember seeing, you know, an Afghan, it was an Afghan soldier come back through our ECP, and they took him over to the BAS, and his leg was blown off below the knee. And I remember thinking at the time, like, like that's what it looks like.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it looks like a movie prop, and like I'm not grossed out, like I'm not feeling weird about it. Like it was like that's interesting, you know, like
yeah.
I don't know if it would have been that same way had I not had that live tissue training, you know.
That's an underrated well, I don't think it's underrated. I think the people that run the training and the people that have been exposed to the training all, you know, preach how great it is. It's the who like the PETA people out there and the people outside the organizations that are against for those that don't know what we're talking about, live tissue training is one, it starts out, it's a TCCC, so Tactical Casualty Combat Care, I believe is the acronym there. It was like a 2-week course, right? We had a few days of like classroom instruction.
Yeah.
Remember within the first 10 minutes that lieutenant passed out?
Yeah, I do remember that.
Dude, so it starts out
he wasn't from our team.
No, he wasn't from our team. He was, I don't know who he was with, but it was they start out with like, hey, here are some photos of actual fucking IED blast injuries from right out of Iraq and stuff. And don't get me wrong, it's fucking rough, but I was like, damn, that dude just passed out. That's crazy. You know, like that's how bad it was.
Yeah. I think we did at least a week of training on main side. It was at least a week.
All kinds of stuff. We did the nose hose. We did different kinds of tourniquets and stuff like that. We did the different kinds of litters, like the skeds and the hard litters and stuff. And then the live tissue training portion of it for ours, I guess they use goats as well, but ours were like pigs. And they take you out to a farm in the middle of nowhere that's got blacked out fencing and stuff. And it's super professional. It's not, no one acts fucked up. The instructors are all professional. Yeah. The animals are all, or what do we refer to them as, patients the whole time. There was a vet on station that had them all sedated. And if they made any kind of movement like they're not sedated, they immediately gave it some more.
And you know, they were on their way to the slaughterhouse too. But one of the things I really found interesting is that they had like professional like veterinarians there to make sure like the pigs weren't feeling anything. And I remember like seeing one of the veterinarians, like she looked like sad that these things were happening to this animal. And I asked her like how she was doing. She's like, this is sad. She's like, it hurts me to see an animal like this. She's like, but I know what it's worth. Like, I would much rather you guys learn from this and be able to take care of each other. You know, she's like, I understand the value of this. So I'm going to make this pig as comfortable as possible. You know?
Yeah. And they cut them open with scalpels. They shoot them. They cut a leg off of one, you know, like they do all kinds of stuff to them just so you can see what these wounds actually look like and treat them. And the most valuable lesson to me was at the very end, the instructor's like, look, man, this pig's missing 2 legs. He's got a needle D going on because his collapsed lung, you know, you got a bandage wrapped here. You've like plugged the wound here and he's still alive. And you're looking at it and you're like, holy shit, it is. Like all this stuff has happened to it and it's still alive. Like that's crazy, you know? And that kind of gives you a little bit of confidence that like our medical treatment, our medical care, you know, is going to work if we need it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And all the corpsmen were like, bro, this is it. This is the best training you're going to get. You know, and I've done the $1 million fucking simulator that has fake blood and they can do all kinds of stuff with it, and it's just not the same, you know. It's sticking your hand in like feeling that warm blood as you're sitting there packing a wound, and like it sounds fucking gross, but that's the reality of it, and it's
you learn
great training.
What works and what doesn't too. Like, hey, you see how he's still bleeding out? Like, you didn't get that tourniquet tight enough. Like, really crank it down. Like, don't worry about hurting him. Like, you know. So yeah, and I just feel like that was just one part of like the training that we got prior to our deployment that really like I felt as prepared as possible going into it.
Yeah, super valuable training for sure. You know what was weird for me is when we went out to 29 Palms and we had all the role players and they did the like line up across from your guy and this is who you're going to be his advisor, and I'm like, this is stupid, like we'll never do this. And it was like the first thing we did when we got to Afghanistan, and we like lined up across from our dudes. It was like, hey, this is your dude. And I'm like, I can't believe this is like actually what we're doing right now.
Yeah. And I think I took, you know, as a flight instructor, I think I subconsciously like took a lot of notes that like I integrate into my training whenever I'm working with a new student. You know, just the way that everything was kind of set up in a building block approach. And it's like, we're going to give you enough skills and training for today, and then tomorrow we're going to give you enough training and skills for tomorrow, all with the goal of, you know, preparing you to be independent of instruction later on. And, you know, I think I've learned a lot because of the Marine Corps as an instructor. And, you know, when I go over to work with other instructors to help them improve like their syllabus and their school and their instructional methods, like I'm just tapping into the experience that I have as an advisor. You know, that's where that started for me. So I've stolen a lot of experience from the Marine Corps that I can apply as a civilian.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. They tons of good experience interacting with people, understanding that some people are morons. You just got to deal with it, you know. That's just the way it is. When you found out we were going to Sangin, what'd you think?
I was like, wow, Sangin, like we are going to combat. And I had some buddies who were like Harrier pilots at the time, and they were, you know, going through their own training in the platform. And I was like, guys, like going to Sangin, like of all places, they're like, where's Sangin? And it was interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when they told us, I was like, fuck, man, this is for real. Like, this is my first deployment as a JTAC, and they want me to, this is where I'm going. Like, and for me, it was tough because it was like, there's no other dudes to lean on. Luckily, we had the company JTAC that was there, Stork. I would go over and hang out with him and stuff, but there was no one, like, they have an entire team of people, an air officer, multiple FACs, multiple JTACs, and they all train together and work together. And that was a rough spot for me, is like, oh man, I'm like one of one, and this is like a super serious job. I can't fuck this up. You know, did you have any kind of like, it wasn't a reservation, but did you have thoughts like that? Like, man, this is going to be for real. Like, I can't fuck this up.
Yeah, I would say more so. Um, I definitely remember feeling that. Like, yeah, this isn't a fucking game. Like, we're actually really going to combat. Like, we're not going to be on Camp Leatherneck. Like, we're not going to be at a fob somewhere in the rear. Like, we are going to be out there on the front lines. But I do remember. So, like, for those listening, we had a pretty caked setup at our fob. Like, all things considered.
Oh,
Like,
for
we
sure.
had the satellite phones, and we had like the Cheetah systems, which was like awesome internet that's probably faster than what I have in my house right now. We had air conditioning and like the little HESCO barriers, and we had that little badass gym that Jared and I put together from shit that we stole from Camp Leatherneck.
Dude, that gym was awesome.
Yeah, but that's one of those things that I haven't thought about until I started talking about it here. But I remember being on the satellite phone with my family. And you remember what was the operation like? It was like the big last operation that the Afghans did before we left. It was like Eagle 38 or something like.
Yeah, I don't remember any of the names.
But I remember being like, it's fighting season, which was about nowish. Like it was like May is when I remember fighting season starting. Like we're right in the middle of fighting season, and we are tagging along with these folks. I don't think I'm gonna die tomorrow, but realistically, this could be like the last time that I'm talking to my family, and I can't even tell them about it. Like that was a weird experience.
Yeah, it was. So let's talk about when we got there. Then let's talk about within like an hour, we flew into Leatherneck. Well, first we took the scariest ever commercial flight I've ever had. Do you remember the turbulence that we had on our way to like Iceland or wherever it was that we were heading?
Yeah, we were getting the shit beat out of us.
Dude,
yeah.
I remember the pilot, like we got like a big shake of turbulence and the pilot comes over, he's like, flight attendants, take your seats. And I'm like, all right. And then like a second later, we get another big shake and he comes over again. He's like, flight attendants, take your seats. And his voice like cracked. And I'm like, oh my God, the fucking pilot's scared.
Yeah.
And then for like 15 minutes, it was just riding the scariest fucking roller coaster ever.
Yeah.
That has to be one of the worst flights I've ever had. I don't know if you remember that or not, but it scared the shit out of me.
Yeah, vaguely.
Yeah, so we flew from there, and then we went to. I remember it because I was sitting next to Emil, and he was also like, "Jesus, here we go. We're gonna die before we even get there."
Yeah.
But eventually, we make our way into Leatherneck, and within an hour of being in Leatherneck, it starts getting mortared or rocket. It was a rocket attack or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was like, all right, welcome to Afghanistan. Here we go. And I remember also when we landed, like right when we landed, like three or four medevac helicopters took off, and one of the guys that was their first deployment was like, oh, maybe they're just training or something like that. And I'm like, bro, the training's over, man. I'm like, that's for real.
So I actually forgot about that event. So we were at Leatherneck for probably like a week and a half or so before we actually went over to Fob Jackson.
No, was it really that long? I thought it was only like a day or two.
Because we did a few ranges out there, and they had stuff with like a little like IED robot sweeper things.
You're right. Everything. Yeah, you're right. I forgot about all that because I had to take the JTAC test while I was there too.
Yeah,
the ROE test.
So by the time we finally went over to Fob Jackson, I remember the 53 dropping us off of the LZ and us getting off. I was like, man, this feels like Vietnam or something, right? And then only a few hours later, that was the night that the Taliban was trying to cross the Helmand River, and British longbows and HIMARS were just fucking them up. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah, dude.
And we were watching it all from the comfort of our HESCO barrier on closed circuit television. It was from the PTIDs, and I was like, this is insane.
Well, we were standing outside, so the other advisor team was super pumped that we were there. So they were having a cookout. So we're outside standing next to the HESCOs grilling steaks, and there's tracer fire flying over the camp. And I'm like, man, that's like maybe 10 feet above us, Yeah. And I'm like, damn, dude. And then the longbows came in and took those dudes out. They actually, I remember the next day they brought the bodies over too in the back of a pickup truck. They're like, those are those dudes from last night. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah. I was like, that was my welcome to Afghanistan moment. I was like, this shit's for real, man. Like this is going to be a hell of a deployment. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, Fob Jackson was a shitty little spot. It was tiny. I mean, it was what it is. But you're right. The advisor team that was there before us hooked it up. They had some kind of in with the MCCS people or something, and they got a nice TV, an Xbox, stereo system out back. Like for people that don't know, like normally, we were living in these dirt huts. Basically, it's a HESCO hut to protect you from indirect fire if they drop a mortar or something.
That's like essentially filled with like rocks and cement, basically. Like, dirt. Yeah.
And it had some kind of metal roof, but it kind of looked like aluminum. But I'm like, maybe it'll stop something.
Yeah.
But we had it hooked up in the back. We had a dartboard. We had the TV and the Xbox and stuff, which me and who else was it? There was a couple guys. We built the entire advisor team on one of the hockey teams. Like we created all of our actual stats and stuff, and won the Stanley Cup with it.
Yeah,
on NHL. The cheetah system that normally at least a Marine company has that. They didn't know that we had that. I don't think so. We had pretty good internet. And we were kind of living, but we were also the only guys on that FOB that were going outside the wire, because at that time it was a very Afghan centric, like, hey, we want them to take over the fight. So no QRF staging outside the wire, no companies forward deploy. We were actively tearing down the last Marine patrol bases when we got there. Yeah. So, and I don't know if I just remember also thinking like, man, this is a shithole, but it'll work, I guess.
Yeah, I got to give credit to Jared too, our four. He was really good at getting stuff for us, whether it was like through official channels or whether it was like, hey, there's a gym right over here behind the post office, which is literally like a stone's throw away from the Camp Leatherneck gym. Like they don't need these free weights. Like we need these.
We had a sweet gym out back. Super sick, and it had those shipping containers like butted up to it, so nobody from Kilo 3-4 could like peek in and fuck with us or anything like that.
They were salty about that too. They did not remember the sergeant major tried taking our gear and putting it at their main gym.
Yeah,
it's like no.
I was working out there one morning. My routine was get up, eat some oatmeal, and then go out there and lift. And I was out there lifting one morning, and he came by, and it was like the meth sergeant major had flown in or something like that. And he popped in with him, and he's like, "Did you shave today, Marine?" I'm like, "Dude, I'm thinking I just got up." And he's like, "See, this is what I have to deal with, Sergeant Major." Like, and I'm like, "What the fuck, man? Like, we have all this shit to keep you guys out. You don't even have to come back here. Like, why are you coming back here to fuck with us? It was crazy, man. It was a good time though. Yeah, Sangin was something else, and working with the Afghans. What was your thoughts on how the Afghans took the lesson? We were the last advisor team. It was planned that we were supposed to be the last advisor team. Like, so we were it. It was like, hey, ask any questions you got now, because this is it. What was your take on the Afghan like mental attitude, of the guys and stuff that we were working with?
Well, I thought that they were. It's hard to say in hindsight too, but I thought that at least from the counterparts that I had, that they were fairly competent in just their basic duties. The adj that I was working with was like a younger enlisted soldier that was probably about a little bit younger than I was. He was maybe like 22, 23 or something like that. And that was an officer's position. The officer was, I think, like UA for like a year or something like that. So this guy was just doing his job, kind of learning it on the fly. But whenever I had questions for him, like, hey, what's going on with your pay? Or what's going on with all these folks that are on UA? Like, whether they were like correct answers or not, he always had an answer for me. I was like, well, this guy is like, he at least knows what's going on. But I remember for all of them, they called it the big question. And they were like, well, when you guys leave in 2014, like, who knows what the hell is going to happen to this place? And everyone just called it, like, the big question. Like, what happens after you guys leave in 2014? And I think that, like, one of the challenges that I had, like, we kind of in some ways had to be the bad guy. And we kind of in some ways like had to tell them no, even when we had a solution for them, because they needed to learn how to do this stuff and come up with solutions organic to them, like on their own, that doesn't require American assistance. For instance, like making 500 copies of like their personnel rosters. And it was something that the previous advisor team did for them like on a daily basis. They'd be like, hey, we need 500 copies of our roster. And like, I had to go in there and be like, no, we do have a copy machine, but we're not going to let you use it because you need to figure out a way that works for you. And that was a little bit tough, you know? So
I'd imagine the logistics and administrative advising would be the most difficult portion, because the guys that are out fighting, you know, and Sangin, they either got it or they're not. You know, it's like you've either picked it up by now or not, because those guys have been there for a long time fighting, way before we got there. You know, and they had an advisor team trying to help them out and stuff. I always told people it's almost like the reverse of the Marine Corps, where we always say there's always a 10%. There's always a 10% that's like the shit bags, you know, that just like kind of slows shit down. It's like reverse. There's like a 10% of like good dudes that want to be there, that want to see their country succeed and like this become like a thing. And then a lot of like dudes that just are collecting a paycheck, don't care. They're smoking, you know, weed or whatever. They're getting fucked up, or they're just sitting outside picking their toes, you know. Yeah. And to be honest and to be fair, some of these dudes have been getting in fights and losing. A lot of Afghans lost their lives even while we were there. You know, there was a lot of Afghans that got killed. So some of them were shitty, but some of them were probably just burnt out. They're like, fuck it, I'm gonna die anyway, you know.
At least from what I saw, this is just my observations, I think that tactically, like the Afghan National Army Battalion in Sangin, like could hold their own in a fight, if not like win most of the time. I thought that they were pretty tactically proficient. And I would probably say the same from what we were observing of like their logistics sections and their administrative sections at the battalion level. For me, like they seemed to be pretty like fundamentally sound there, but the issues that they were facing were like more systemic. They were like bigger than what was going on at the battalion level.
For sure.
They were like the division and the corps level, where it's like all of our trucks are broke. Like we've submitted, you know, requests to have them fixed or to get the repair parts, but we can't do shit if we don't get the repair parts. You know, it's just stuff like that. I think that, and I don't know, this is always going to be the question that I think like you and I and every other like Afghan veteran of our generation will always struggle with, like, could we have done more? I don't know if I'll ever know the answer to that question. Does that make sense? Like,
I mean, I don't feel like we could have done more, in my opinion. I mean, other than continue to give them things, you know, which is not the answer. You know, at some point they do have to stand on their own. And what could have been done is way before we showed up, people should have stamped out corruption as soon as it happened, rather than going, oh, an Afghan solution to an Afghan problem. You know, that's just the way it is. Like corruption, you know, if that had been done a decade earlier, you know, literally, then they might have had a better opportunity to make something happen. But it's just a different society with a different mindset, where we see it as corruption and it's fucked up, and I don't know if they necessarily see it that way, some of them, you know?
Yeah. And I would also say that, like, I think we have a lot of the same problems in the United States in our modern society. And, you know, just one of the things that, you know, happened over there was, you know, people that would say that they're deeply religious and they would practice their religion every single day, but then they'd go behave in a different way. And I remember people pointing fingers at that, and I'm like, well, we still have those problems in the U.S. too. Mm-hmm. Like, we still have corruption and graft in our society as well. It's on a much different level, and we're also not at combat every single day, so it's probably more apparent. I just don't know how much more could have been done, because, like you said, their society is so much different than ours. Their culture is a polar opposite of ours. And I think you kind of alluded to this, like I don't know if the mission was clearly defined when we initially went into Afghanistan. It seemed like when we first went in, we wanted to eliminate the Taliban, and then it turned into like a nation building exercise for the next, 20 years.
20 years. Fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Fucking crazy. Yeah, it was it's just too much of a tribal society, I think, to ever like fully tame it. You know what I'm saying? To like, and for people that have never been, it's where we were at in Sangin was farmland. It'd be like going to Iowa. You had the small little bazaar, center part of town, and then everything out of that was just houses every quarter mile or something like that. Mud huts. I won't even call them houses. Mud huts.
Rugged Montana-like terrain. Like it was actually I thought it was a beautiful area. I was like,
for sure.
Man, I'd really like to come back here someday as long as nobody's trying to kill me, like.
It was super weird how 611 split, the green zone and brown zone, how it was completely green on one side and completely just desert and dirt on the other side.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I do want to bring up, because you're the person that took the photo of me on top of the rooftop where I'm in front of that LRTV, that long range thermal viewer. I've probably shared it a million times.
Yeah.
Obviously my favorite picture from Afghanistan. I thought that was super cool. A very frustrating moment. Do you remember like what was going on and everything during that?
Not really.
All right. So we were on PB Cuba. I want to say it was on top of PB Cuba, and we were looking down on that valley in the green zone, and the Taliban and the ANA were fighting each other. One was on one side and one was the other. And you could see like the tracer fire and like see stuff happening. And I was working in aircraft, a section of aircraft. And also I had that long range thermal view. I was trying to identify where the enemy was because we had no idea. Because you probably remember like the Afghans couldn't give a pause rep or location, a very accurate location at all. So it was nerve wracking to try to even bring in any kind of assets because you didn't know if you're going to.
A lot of spray and pray.
Yeah.
That. And like that SPG-9 that was at PBQ, wasn't it?
That was when they were shooting that thing constantly. That was at Shamshir-Dew.
That's right. Yeah.
That was in the green zone at Shamshir-Dew. Cuba was across the street up on the hill. We had to go up that really sketchy hill with the trucks. You always thought it might roll one over.
Yeah.
And it was just another one of those firefight moments, and I was like trying to push the Afghan officers away because they kept trying to, like, when I'd go to talk in the radio or something, they'd be like getting their heads down trying to get inside the thermal viewer to see what I was looking at and everything, and I'm like, get the fuck back! I'm like, let me work here, man.
I remember that guy that was like laying right next to you on a rug with like his prayer beads that was just chilling on the roof with fire going on.
Yeah, it was interesting for sure. That patrol base also had like a little weed garden out front. It had like a little prayer grass area with little pot plants surrounding it.
I have a photo of that somewhere, actually.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Yeah, I remember those guys smoking dope and getting stoned and then headed right into a firefight. Like,
yeah. Shamshir-Dew, though. Were you at Shamshir-Dew when we had the combat camera guys out there?
I don't know about... I think I was. I'm pretty sure I was.
That's when there was a big fight and the company commander there got killed.
I don't think I was there for that day. I don't think I was for that one.
Yeah, that was a spicy spot, man. They were always getting attacked in Shamshir-Dew.
Yeah, I think that day I was actually in the COC for 3-4 as like the liaison from our team to like their team. So if we needed to launch QRF like something like that, we could. I think that's where I was that day.
Yeah, they had a few guys. I think they lost like 6 guys or something in that fight. Yeah. And the Taliban were like mutilating their corpses and stuff. It was like we had to send out a group to try to go rescue the rest of the squad, and like immediately started taking fire. And they were just shooting that SPG-9 constantly.
Yeah.
And that was one of the few times also there was an Afghan who was like, hey, we were all facing to the north. There was a tree line to the north that we always took contact from. And that's where we were all looking. And there was an Afghan that was looking at a compound that was kind of to our southwest. And he's like, there's Taliban in there. There's Taliban, give me a grenade. He was trying to get us to shoot a 203 into it. And we're like, we didn't see it. You know, like, where's he at? Where are they at? And he's like, they're in there. And we're like, well, we can't do anything until they shoot at us or we see them, man. And he told Zap, the linguist, he's like, tell these Americans if they're not going to help, or if you're not going to help us, and we're just going to kill you. And I was like, whoa. That was one of the few times I was like, what the fuck? Like, these dudes are, you know, now we got to watch our back from these guys, from the A&A guy. We gave Zap a pistol. We're like, Zap, here's a pistol, dude. Watch that guy. And then it turned out that it was women and kids came out of that compound. There was no Taliban in there, and we knew it because we weren't taking contact from there. But there was a group of women and kids that came out. And we're like, dude, what the fuck, you know?
They just wanted to light the place up, man. Like, totally indiscriminate fire. Like, I remember it was the 4th of July, the night of the 4th of July, and I went up to one of the Connex boxes that was next to our gym. I remember just laying up, looking at the stars, which were beautiful in Afghanistan, by the way. Like,
so dark.
Awesome. Yeah. Like, no light pollution whatsoever. But I just remember watching just tracers, just like crisscross the sky from every direction. And it was just totally indiscriminate. And like, they'd take the dishkas and they just like, you know, and you just watch this like cone of tracers like fly through the air. Like, I was like, this is quite a fireworks show tonight. So.
Yeah, for sure, dude. Super sketchy. They would do that too. I remember one was on PB Transformer on the rooftop shooting a dishka. And we're like, what's he? Because it was like arced up. And we're like, what's he shooting at? Like, what the fuck? And then once we started talking to him, they had a guy on a radio downrange somewhere, and he was like guiding him on. But I'm like, bro, what about all the times you're missing? Like, that's so inaccurate. Luckily it's a farm, but I mean, it's like farm area, so maybe they didn't hit anyone, but they would just lob mortars and stuff randomly at stuff, and it's like, bro, what are you doing?
When I was talking about the Dishka, that's the one that I was thinking of, the one that was at PB Transformer.
Yeah, dude. So crazy. It's some of the stuff that they would do was just an Afghan solution to an Afghan problem, I guess. I don't know.
I remember one of our linguists, I think it was like the mine roller for our MRAP, our 6x, had a problem where it like wouldn't steer anymore. Do you remember that? And like I forgot exactly what happened to it, but like we had to get out there and like fix it or disconnect it or something. Like, we had to go. Like, we were north on 611, and there were some civilians that were getting kind of close to our trucks. It was making us uncomfortable. And we told one of our linguists, we were like, hey, get out there, tell them to go away. Like, I'm shouting at them, they won't go. And he opens the door to this thing. I'm like looking at him like through the turret, like, and he's like, you want me to go now? And I was like, yeah, go now, tell them. So he went out of the back, and like right as he's starting to go down the stairs, like it was like right up the side of the truck, and he was like right back into the truck. He's like, I'm not going out there. I was like, all right. Like,
yeah, it's probably a good idea. Don't go out
there. Tell me what to yell at him. Like,
fuck, man. That was when you mentioned it earlier about the fighting season starting and stuff like that, the Taliban made like an actual announcement. Like, you know, today is when the fighting season starts. There was like an official announcement, and everything picked up. I remember everything picking up, and one of the first things that happened is I remember we stopped to, there was like a Afghan, it was like an Afghan police post or something like that was taking some shots or something like that. And we drove up. I remember we drove up to see if they needed anything. Yeah. And this might have been the same incident because we had the linguist getting out of the back. It was like me and Emil were in the back, and well, no, Fosberg would have been on the turret then. But anyways, this dude opens the door to go see if they need anything. And right when he opens it, we just hear clack, 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 and just slam the door shut. And we grab him. And he's like, I'm hit. And we're like, oh, where you hit? And he's like, or they shot me is what he was saying. And we're like, where? And he's like, oh, they shot at me. And we're like, oh my God, dude. Like, but those rounds is slamming into the back of the truck. I was like, holy shit, dude. That was close. Because if one of those had come into the truck, you know, who knows how it would have bounced around and fucked up at least one of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
man.
It was interesting being a gunner there. I remember we were coming north up 611, and I was the rear vehicle, and so I was pointed at 6 o'clock, And I remember there was this guy coming up on like a little motor scooter, and I noticed that cars would come up to him, and then like they'd look out their window and they'd see who it was, and they'd like hightail it back in the other direction. Like, we aren't even fucking with this guy, you know, like.
Yeah.
So it was just like one car after another would like get up close to him and then turn away. And then I remember him coming. There was another kid on a little motorbike that came up, and I could see them talking with each other. And then he started, riding slowly towards us and like looking back. And he'd like inch his way closer to us and like keep looking back. And I'm like waving flags at him. I'm like, stop, like Nishta, like Zai, like go away. And he kept inching closer and closer until like I shot a pen flare at him. And then he like basically like did like a little like dirt like Brody on the way out of there, and just flew past the guy. I'm sure that like that guy was just using that kid as like a probe to see how close he could get to our convoy before we did anything about it. You know?
Yeah, for sure.
Like,
it was sketchy going through the bazaar, man. Because cars, one of the most scared moments I had was in the bazaar. We had one of the guys got sent home for some family stuff, and they're like, Kramer, you got to drive. And I was like, this is bullshit. I shouldn't be driving. I'm the JTAC. How am I going to drive? And it was with Falvey. I had Falvey in the passenger seat, Captain Falvey at the time. And we were going through the bazaar, and I remember like getting close to the far end of it, which would be the north side of it for those that have been there. And there's like a bridge and stuff on that side. And there's this like car just flying at us. And I'm like, what the fuck? And at the last second, he cuts towards us. And a couple days before that, a group of Brits had died in a SV bid, the Suicide Vehicle Borne IED. And I just remember, like, when it cut towards me, I, like, closed my eyes and, like, winced and, like, looked away and waited for the explosion. Yeah. And all it was is that he was trying to get his tires through a little gap in the speed bump that was right there. And it was... Yeah. But, dude, I looked at Falvey and we were like, dude. And that right there, like, even though nothing actually happened, probably fucked with me more than a lot of stuff that happened. Like, I thought about that for a while because I was like, there was nothing I could have done. Because if that had been a SV bid, I was smoked. That was it.
Like, you're right. Throughout the process of this podcast, like, all these memories are coming flooded back to me that I haven't thought about in years. It's like, I remember going over that culvert that was right on the other side of that bend on 611 that our sister team had gotten blown up at, like, only like 2 days prior. And like every time I went over that culvert, it was like
the culvert. That's what we called it. We're like, hey, we're past. That became a checkpoint because what? Like,
still alive.
A couple days before that, what had happened was, and no one had gotten blown up. We stopped it from happening, but I went into the Kilo 34 COC, and I was sitting there with Stork, who was their JTAC, and we were watching, just kind of watching the area, and I think he had a Harrier come on station or something, or he may have requested it, I don't remember. But the PGSS, the blimp, was looking down the road, just doing route scans, and saw these guys and placing an IED in that culvert, and they would run one piece at a time. There was a blown up house probably 30 meters away from it, just up the hill a little bit from it, and it was all blown up. You could tell it had been blown up before. And they were running one piece at a time of the IED out and putting it in the culvert. So here's the jug. Now we're going to run the wire. Now we're going to run the pressure plate. And we're watching all this. And Stork had a Harrier on station and was going to do a gun run on them. We were waiting for them. They wouldn't approve it while they were in the house because it was a compound. Even though it was blown up to the point where we could see them through the roof, and we could see the RPG leaning against the wall and the guns leaning against the wall. But they wouldn't let us do a strike. We had to do it while he was out in the open in the road. And it took the Harrier had to do a couple circles because we had to get the timing right. And then the one time that it dove in and he was about to give him clearance and it had been approved by battalion, whoever the Kilo 34 company commander was like, hey, tell him abort. And he's like, oh shit, abort. And we're like, hey, what was the reason? What was the reason for the abort? He's like, I just want to make sure the battalion commander is sure he wants to do this strike. And we're like, they already gave approval. What are you talking about? And so we ended up not being able to get the guys. I think the Harrier had to check off or something like that. Or maybe they left the area. I don't remember. But we sent the Afghans out to disarm the IED, a.k.a. probably shoot it till it blew up. And and then
out by hand probably.
And then every day after that, it was like, hey, we're going over the culvert. We'd all go, okay, we made it across it. Like, it just waiting to get blown up.
I thought the sketchiest part of the bazaar, though, was the kids.
Oh, yeah.
Which, like, it's a shame because those kids were incredibly athletic. Like, they'd be on their little bicycle and they'd, like, jump off of their bicycle and, like, grab onto, like, the chicken wire that we had, like, around, like, the bed of the Mat V. And short of, like, shooting them, like, there was nothing I could do to, like, get them off. And, like, I'd save all the rocks that got thrown at us so I could use, like, non-lethal rock throwing to, like, get him back off the truck. But I remember one kid, like, jumped off of his bicycle, climbed up the fence as I'm trying to get another kid off of the other side of the vehicle, and took, like, this long, like, machete blade and, like, chopped through the ratchet straps, stole a comm antenna, and was, like, left before I could even, like, do anything about it.
Yeah, they're like little ninjas. He got that 201 Bravo. I remember that.
Yeah, and I was just like, what was I supposed to, like, shoot him? Like, and if, you know, the whole thing was, like, if he had a grenade and he tossed it into, like, the turret, like, I'm going to have to shoot him. Like, that was tough. Like, that, I think, was, like, the sketchiest part of the bazaar.
The little kids everywhere that would, like, run up to the vehicles. And, yeah, they would do that exactly. So that we got the antenna back and the cable. We talked to Yeah, I was gonna say the mafia don of Sangin, Sergeant Major Hassan, who grabbed like a couple Afghan soldiers, jumped in his Danger Ranger like with blacked out tinted windows, and was gone for like 15 minutes and came back with it and was like, "Hey, I don't have the bag and the cable's cut, but here's the antenna." And we're like, "Oh, sick! Like, thanks. That makes life a lot easier."
Yeah.
Than having to report that there was a lost antenna.
We were like, "How'd you get it back?" He's like, "Don't ask those questions."
Yeah, don't worry about it. Yeah. Super sketchy. You know, the kids too, like, they were accurate with rocks. There was a gunner, I want to say it was on the advisor team before us or someone from 3-4, but I think it was on the advisor team before us. One of the guys had been hit in the face with a rock and had to get medevaced out because it like broke his nose and orbital bone, I think.
Yeah,
they had those little slingshots. They were just ready to go at any time.
Yeah. I always felt, and like, honest to God, I always felt bad for those kids, man, because it's just like they were born into this conflict. Like it's the only way they've ever known. And it was just like, we're so fortunate to have grown up where we did with the opportunities and the circumstances that we did, that we're not in a war-torn third world country. And it's like, I couldn't help but like feel bad for the kids more than anything. And it was probably about a year after we had gotten back. Or no, it was probably about a year after I got out of the Marine Corps. I think it was probably about 2016, 2017 timeframe. The Taliban just laid siege to the bazaar and just completely bombed it out. And like the only part of the bazaar that I could recognize was the what we call it, the wedding cake.
The wedding cake, the traffic circle there.
Yep. Like other than that, it was totally unrecognizable. And it's just like, man, like it was heartbreaking to see, you know.
I remember seeing that YouTube video after they had gone through there and fucked it all up. And it's like, man, these people are just trying to live, man. You know, like they're just trying to live. And I don't know, these like crazy, like super extremist ideologies won't even allow you to have like a safe market, you know, for your kids to run around in and just to go buy food and shit like that. Do you remember when that that moped fucking IED or whatever went off in the bazaar, you know?
Yeah.
Like shit like that. It's like, dude, these, you know, I can't imagine being a kid that's growing up in that, where you're living on a farm, you're sleeping outside at night because it's too hot in your mud hut. You know, you're washing in the canal. You go to the bazaar and throw rocks at the you know, Marines and Army guys that are rolling through there. Mm-hmm. You know, it's just like such a weird lifestyle. Yeah. I don't know. It's just I don't know how you fix that, you know?
Yeah. I remember, so we were pretty lucky on our team. So we were the advisor team to the Afghan National Army Battalion there, which Kandak, I think it was. Mm-hmm. And our sister team was the advisor team to the Afghan National Police unit in the area.
Yeah.
I never personally felt like threatened by my counterparts, or I never really felt like there was an active insider threat, or we never had to do anything about that. I know they had a few, and I feel like the corruption within the Afghan National Police unit was much worse than what we experienced on the ANA side of things. And I remember we were all sitting down out in the like little outdoor like mess hall area, and it was probably about noon, and all of a sudden we hear like all this gunfire erupting in the bazaar, which was just like right on the other side of our gate. We were all like, what the hell is happening? Like there were rounds landing around us. I remember like hearing one snap and it like landed like right next to my feet. I was like, oh shit, that was crazy. But apparently I forget exactly how it went down, but the Afghan National Police chief was relieved of duty by like Hamid Karzai himself. And then he came back in and like staged a coup, and all of his, Afghan National Police officers who were getting hooked up by him before were like celebrating by shooting into the air because they were like, our guy's back in town.
Back.
Like, business is good. Like, what a crazy place, man.
Yeah,
like,
that team got benched after that. They were like, hey, you guys can't go because this dude's back, this super corrupt guy that we fired is back. Like, you're not going out there as advisors. You're not working with them at all until they do something about it. So there was like a few weeks where they were just chilling all day, every day, not doing anything because there was no job for them.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
I know another moment, we were sitting out back. It was me and you. We were sitting out back by the TV, and there was a helicopter that took off, and they tried to shoot it down with the RPG.
That's right. Yeah. And weren't they, like, do I remember some sort of, like, it was in the buildings that were just, like, south of our compound? They were using some sort of like reflective light system that I remember, like the pilots. I had a buddy who was an Osprey pilot who said like, yeah, we've been briefed that like they have a signal system with lights and reflective shields or whatever, that when we're coming in, like that's how they coordinate it all.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember when that happened though? It was just like boom, boom, like the rocket launch and then explosion in the air. It was like, holy shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, man. What? Imagine being one of those pilots when that's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Dude.
Great stuff.
It is crazy, man. But there was good times too. We watched Sons of Anarchy. We crushed that while we were there. We played a lot of hockey on NHL.
The Office was another real popular show.
The Office. Fosberg started running a lot. That's where I think his ultra marathon career may have begun. He had like a half-mile loop that he would just run forever, constantly. Yeah, it was, I remember when Jewett, we would get the PX truck, and because we're in Sangin at some shithole, we're like the last stop. So there's like nothing left, ever in it. There was like 4-month-old magazines or something, maybe a bag of weird chips or something. But one of them came, and there was one case of Monsters, and like the entire truck, and Jewett was at the very front of the line and bought the entire case and walked out, and everybody on the fob was like, F you, man, F that guy. And he's like, what? I'll sell you one for, $6 or something like that.
So, like, not all the Marines on the FOB could do this either. We could, because we were on the advisor team. But like crossing over to the other side of the river, like they had that little cigarette hut.
Yeah, the little Haji shop.
Yeah. Like you could get like Afghan energy drinks and like what were they called? Like pine cigarettes or something like that.
Oh, the pine. Yeah, dude, the Afghan energy drinks were something else.
Yeah,
there was one called 9mm. It looked like a bullet and casing. You screwed the bullet off the casing to drink it.
Yeah.
There was a weird one that kind of was like a Red Bull, but it was in a golden can. And someone was like, "Yeah, you'll probably have a heart attack if you drink that one." And I'm like, "God, man!" But it was the only place we could get a cold drink.
Yeah. What wasn't it called? Like Golden Tiger or something like that.
Something, man.
Sex Panther or something.
Sex Panther. Yeah, it was a good time for sure. It was just a lot of cool stuff. I wish we could have swam in that little river where they would all the Afghans would swim. It was probably super gross and polluted, but it would have been cool, like when it was super hot out to
When
like
it
jump in.
would have been awesome. I remember Zap caught me some fish out of that thing, and he came by. It looked like catfish, and he's like, "You guys want to eat?" And everyone on our team was like, "Fuck no, I'm not even going to touch that." Like, I'll eat it. Like,
Yeah, get that alien fish out of here. Yeah, they did. I remember one time they went out and bought a bunch of stuff from the bazaar, and we had that big ass cookout. That was fun.
yeah.
Yeah,
A lot of fresh fruit and tomatoes, and yeah, I remember that. It was
because
great.
we were just eating crap, man. I always tell people, I'm like, man, we would go to the little food tent. You'd get like one scoop out of the ladle of whatever and of whatever protein or whatever the fuck it is, and then one maybe a vegetable and a box of milk. And it was like, man, we were living off care packages for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
Man, it was that it's that kind of living though, like really makes you appreciate things,
For sure. I remember when I got back, I went back to my storage unit because I was just a single guy, like it was just renting a house at the time. So I just, before I left, put all my shit into a storage unit. And I remember opening it up when I got back home and looking around and be like, what is all of this shit? Like, and it took me a while to like take things like the microwave for granted again. It's like I could just throw my food in this thing and just nuke it and go to my couch and eat from the comfort of my own couch, and like not like all the creature comforts that you take for granted. I really feel like it puts all that stuff into focus.
Yeah, we had none of that. We had piss tubes. That you had to swat the flies away as you were pissing so that they didn't land on you as they came out of it.
Yeah.
Wag bag stations that were just all gross.
I did learn to appreciate open air dumps. I will say that was the silver lining of the wag bag situation.
Just being able to I would always like, hey, let's see how far away from the fire you can get and still make it in. Yeah. My hefty bag here. It's got a nice weight, nice.
Still warm.
Man, yeah, we probably got cancer from that thing, from that burn pit.
Yeah. Sure, we'll figure it out like 20 years from now, probably.
Something exploded in it one time. I don't know if it was a battery or what. Hit some guy in the ass, and he had to get like medevaced out of there.
Was that at the ECP? Was it like old Russian ammunition or something like that?
It was something. I don't know what it was, but I just remember something like blew up in the fire and it like hit some dude in the ass that was like walking by or something.
The burn pit. Yeah.
Yeah, from the burn pit.
Yeah.
Man, yeah, the smoke that lingering over you all day of burning shit, plastic, all that, just breathing it in. That's why I'd see Fosberg going out and running miles, and I'm like, dude, you're just sucking in all that. Just, like huffing it, basically.
Yeah.
Man, it was a good feeling to get out of there, though, because we had that. I remember they're like, hey, you guys are leaving early. Ramadan's coming up. We're supposed to leave right after Ramadan anyway, and we all know they're not going to do anything during Ramadan. So, there's no justification for keeping us here beyond that. So let's start packing stuff up. Let's start getting rid of stuff. And then they came back and they're like, all right, we got to do one more mission, and I'm like, oh, fuck, here's the one. This is the one where someone gets fucked up. Yeah. And that was one where I almost got shot in the face, like up on the rooftop, back up on PB Cuba. And
was that combined with the massive dust storm that everyone was hunkered down for? Because there was a huge, what they call it, like a haboob or something, right? Like
I don't remember what they call it, but yeah, that sandstorm. No, that wasn't that one because I have a photo from Shamshir Dew. That was at PB Shamshir Dew. We had been. I don't know if we ever shot back at them, but we've been taking fire from that tree line.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's, I've got a couple good photos from that I think Emil sent me one or two and one that I took with my tablet that I had, but yeah, man, it was good. It was good to hear that we were coming home though. I was like, man, finally, like I had enough of this. Like there's been a lot of close calls. Let's just get out of here. What was your thoughts when it was like, hey, we're getting out of here?
Well, first, I was really excited that I was going to be able to make it to the air show because, like,
of course,
early July, late June, and like I've been to this air show every year of my life, so like my biological like calendar is telling me like it's right around the corner, and like I'm hearing my family talk about it on like Facebook and everything. So that was my first thought. When there were like rumblings that it was probably around like early July, like it all happened really quick. When the decision was made to lift off, like it happened within a few days. Like I've never seen anything happen that quick in the Marine Corps. But I was like, when the rumbling started, I was like, I'm not going to get my hopes up. If I get my hopes up, the Marine Corps is surely going to crush them. So I'm not even going to think about it. And I think it was like, we were doing our 4th of July like cookout, and I think we found out during the cookout that we were actually like lifting off and going home in like 4 days or something like that. Like it really happened quick.
Yeah, I think it was. Well, no, I think it might have been. Well, we might have first heard about it then, but we didn't leave until we didn't get out of country until like the 29th, I think, of July, or maybe the 30th, right?
It was before that because the air show at Oshkosh was probably like the last week of July.
Oh, and you were there for the whole thing?
Yeah, well, I had to come back to Camp Lejeune and do like post-deployment training. But yeah, I made it for the first few days.
Oh, maybe it was then, yeah.
Yeah, but like the justification then, and I still agree with this now, like if we talk about, could we have done more in Afghanistan? Like the justification for it was they're fighting the Taliban as I think effectively that they can on a tactical level. A lot of their issues are systemic, and they're going to continue to rely on us as a crutch for as long as we continue to allow them to rely on us as a crutch. So like you said, with Ramadan around the corner, I think that was the decision that was made. That's like, there's really not a whole lot else that we can do here at this point.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with that. I think that had we been there any longer, we would have done nothing more than enable them to continue to use us as a crutch.
And put people in needless danger, Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
3-4 after we left, 3-4 was like, thank God those advisors are gone. They started going out on ops.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ended up having a tank get blown up out there and had to get recovered and all kinds of stuff after we told them. We're like, don't take fucking tanks into Sangin. Don't take them into the green zone. Don't take them anywhere over there. And what do they do as soon as we leave? They brought tanks down there, and one of them got blown up and stuck out in a field. And I actually, when we left, and I went on my second MEU, the artillery officer that was on the MEU with me, Burton, he was the JFO for that tank company. So he was telling me about it. He's like, yeah, man, it was like all this shit, this different stuff happened. So it's just stupid. It's like, dude, you went out there and got guys fucked up for no reason,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, it was good to get back though. I was all about it, like just being done with it. I had my fill of shenanigans and Sangin. And then yeah, dude, after that it was just my life kind of became a whirlwind. I turned around and went back to Lejeune and then Anglico, and then just deployments, just racked up deployments.
That happened pretty quickly, didn't it? Like you didn't have very much downtime before you got on to the next thing, right?
I was deployed within a year. You know, as soon as I got I got back to 10th Marines. I was there for a few months teaching guys JFO primer stuff and getting all my qualifications back up. And I went to Pendleton in January of 2014. And I checked in to Anglico on to First Anglico on like a Friday, like the 4th or 5th. And then I checked out on Monday and checked into the MEU and started my MEU workup. And then turned around and deployed again. So
yeah.
After after your deployment, what was for the rest of your couple of years before you got out? What'd you have going on?
So the first thing that kind of happened that would later kind of change the direction of my life, when we stopped over in Germany at that place. Remember we were getting beer and everything?
Yeah.
It was pretty good. I picked up it was a flying magazine. It was like a plane and pilot magazine or sport aviation or something like that. And I was reading it on the way back home. And this prior airplane pilot described his paramotor training process. And he described for the first time in his life as a prior airplane pilot, like he ran into the sky for the first time. And prior to this, I had always seen the paramotors over at Oshkosh in their own little corner of like the airport. And to me, I always thought like, that looks boring. It looks dangerous. It looks unsafe. And those guys are kind of weird. They're like, I always kind of like describe them as like the weird cousins of aviation. So until I read this article of a prior airplane pilot like me who went out and got paramotor training, he described this process of running into the sky. And I was like, that seems pretty cool. Like, I haven't looked at that sport in that light yet. And I have a pocket full of deployment money now to spend. So I went to Oshkosh and looked into paramotor training. Went to airborne school in 2013. I was kind of lucky that I got to do that as a logistics officer because it was a training and readiness event. And I was like, airborne school was fun, but like, I want to go back up again. Like, I want to go look around and see stuff. So in 2014, I got paramotor training, and it really would go on to like change the direction of my entire life at that point. Went back to headquarters battalion. I was the XO there for probably, or the truck company XO for probably about a year to a year and a half. Got shot down again for the field accession board, and worked a deal. I think I just explained this already, but worked a deal with my monitor where it's basically like, look, I'm voluntarily staying on station so I can, have a final shot at this thing. And of course I didn't get it. And in that process, I was just like, look, I'm really thankful for the time that I've had in the Marine Corps. I would have rather have flown, but I'm thankful for this experience. Met a lot of great people, had a lot of good experiences, but the Marine Corps is not going to let me fly no matter how hard I try. And I miss flying. So probably mid 2016 or so, I drafted up my resignation letter, and I swear it happened this way. Like, I was about to send it off to my monitor and like hit send, and then right before I did, I got this email from him. It was like, hey, like, John, congratulations. You got the orders that you wanted first on your list. You're going to second MSOB now as their 4. So I was like in this moment where it's just like, oh my God, like the Marine Corps actually gave me what I wanted. And like, this is a really awesome opportunity. But I was also like, if I take these orders, I'm committed at least to another 3 years. And at that point, I'm going to be in this game for 10 years. And if I've done 10 years, I might as well do 20, or I'm still a single guy without a family or responsibilities or anything like that, and I miss flying. I have an opportunity right now to make a clean break. So it was like really this moment where I had to like decide to leave something else behind so I could go on and do something that I loved. And that's when I left to become a paramotor instructor. So yeah,
that's crazy, man. I was watching. I was telling my buddy the other day that I was having you on and about the paramotors, and I was like, oh, let's pull a video up on YouTube. And some dude flying up to like 17,000 feet or something like that. I'm like, man, that looks crazy.
Yeah. I've been flying airplanes my whole life, and airplanes will always be my first love, but flying a paramotor is just a totally different flying experience. It really, to me, like the glider that's above my head feels like an extension of my own body. Like the paramotor itself only feels like a prosthesis that enables me to run into the sky. And like compare that to flying an airplane, you're surrounded by a fuselage with communications to manage and instruments to monitor. And I appreciate that, but it feels to me more of like I'm operating a machine when I'm flying an airplane rather than becoming the flying machine. And I've kind of gotten to the point in my career now as an instructor where I enjoy teaching students and teaching them how to fly and changing their life in a radical way more than I enjoy the act of flying for myself at this point. Like if I have a choice between like going out and flying for myself or I have a student that wants to fly, like I'm going to go pick the student to fly because like I just really enjoy being a part of their process, you know. For a lot of students, so most of the students that I get don't have any prior aviation experience whatsoever. And that's one of the things that's so attractive about the sport is it doesn't require a license. It doesn't require any training legally. It doesn't require medical. And to get into the sport, it only costs about $12,000 to $15,000 to go from zero to hero, which sounds like a lot. But when you compare it to getting a pilot's license and then like buying an airplane and fueling it and maintaining it and hangering it and all that stuff, like those costs add up quick. And like this is comparable to like buying a motorcycle. cost wise.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really attractive to people who have always wanted to fly, but they've perhaps never had the financial means or the opportunity or the time. Their career has never lined up. It's like their gateway drug to aviation. And for a lot of the students that I have, it is the craziest thing that they've ever done in their entire life. Some of them are like at a midlife crisis, and they're like, I need to do something with my life. I need a change. I need something powerful. I need to go out and, do something adventurous. Like, what is that thing? And then they stumble across a video of it on YouTube, and they just keep pulling the thread, and I get this really opportunity to be like a lightning bolt of aviation into their life that changes the way they see the entire world.
How long does it take to work up from like, hey man, I think I'm interested in this, to now I'm out flying? Like, how long is that time span?
You mean like the whole overall like training process?
Yeah.
So good question. I have two different training plans. One is a part-time training plan where it's like you give me as much as your time, like in a piecemeal fashion. Like maybe these are the weekend warriors who have a full-time job and they just can't get away from it. They don't have the vacation time. And overall, like that's my least preferred method of training because it's just so inefficient. Learning how to fly a paramotor is not so much information that you should spread it out over like 3 or 4 months like you'd expect with a pilot's license. And like when you spread it out, the instructor's schedule gets in the way, the student's schedule gets in the way, weather gets in the way. So part-time training is possible, but it's not the way I prefer to train people. The way I prefer to train them is within like a paramotor boot camp format, where they give me roughly 10 days of their time, 10 straight consecutive days from sunrise to sunset. If everything lines up, like the weather is really good, the student is really proficient and in shape, and everything lines up, we could probably get it done in as short as like 7 days. And by get everything done, I mean like they're going through all the ground school. They're getting all the training on airspace, weather, maintenance, regulations, wing design, aerodynamics, flight principles, aeronautical decision making, like all of that good stuff. So they get the training done, and they've also had enough flights to where they are now like operating independently of instructor like supervision or guidance. Like they're ready to start flying for their own. As quick as possible, everything lining up about 7 days. I would say on average, it's more like 10. And then if things don't line up, like we get skunked on weather like a few days in a row, sometimes 12 to 14, but more often than not, it falls in about 10 consecutive days.
What does that thing weigh, man?
43 pounds empty. So just as it sits without fuel, without flotation devices, and without a reserve parachute, it's about 43 pounds. And then when you start loading it up with everything, fuel, flotation, reserve, it's usually about 65 pounds. So like a relatively like heavy, rucksack. However, that weight is only on your feet for a very short period of time. And, one of the exercises that we have is we teach people how to like lean back and use their body position to like better manipulate the thrust line. So it's not only like pushing them into the air, but it's also taking the weight off of their feet. In addition to the glider that's clipped into the swing arms down here, it's now starting to lift up and take that weight off of their feet as well. So once you learn how to like do all of those, necessary steps of inflate, release, control, posture, power, pressure, once you get all that done, you aren't even really thinking about the weight anymore. You're just running. It feels like you're running with a strong wind to your back,
How long? So once you're up, how long can you fly around for?
We're limited to 5 gallons of fuel capacity. Although most of our fuel tanks are about 3 or so gallons, 2.5, 3 gallons. They burn probably about 1 gallon to 1.5 gallons of just auto gas an hour. So realistically, we can fly for hours on a single tank, especially if we have 5 gallons of fuel. It's not really good for traveling. There's not very much of a practical purpose to it. But more often than not, we're limited not by like the fuel in our tank, but the flyable times of the day. Like most of our flyable windows are 30 minutes before sunrise, up to like 2 hours after sunrise, and then again 2 hours before sunset and 30 minutes after sunset. The reason is because like during that middle part of the day, that's where the conditions start getting like really strong and thermic, and you're getting knocked around up there. If not, like it can become kind of unsafe pretty quickly. So more often than not, like our flyable time is really limited to like those 2 hour windows within the day.
Interesting.
I have done it was like a 290-mile cross country like adventure race around Central Florida, which was a lot of fun. And that was like a 4-day trip. Like that was, from Lake Wales over to the East Coast around like Lake Okeechobee and then back up to Lake Wales in the center of the state. And it's not an efficient way to travel. You're only about 30 to 40 miles an hour. And if you get a 20-mile headwind on the nose, like now you're only moving over the ground at 20 miles an hour. But yeah, it's not very much practical purpose to it, but it is a whole hell of a lot of fun.
Well, you take some good photos, man. I mean, that's a great viewpoint for photography, right?
Yeah. And it's like trying to put those pictures into words, like put those experiences into words. It's like trying to explain color to a blind person, like yeah. I remember flying in Costa Rica once and like looking down, and I was like on the coast, and like the sun was setting over the Pacific, and I'm climbing over these mountain range with my Costa Rican buddy Gigi. And I'm looking down, and I'm like looking at all these little like red sparkles beneath me, like flying through the air. I was like, what the hell is that? Like I couldn't process it and see what it was until I realized like they were flocking macaws, like parrots. And it's just like, looking at the sunset, looking at my buddy, looking at these macaws, and it's like, how am I going to explain this to someone? It's just like one of those things that you really do have to experience for yourself.
Yeah, man, those moments are key,
Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome. So if people want to reach out to you, well, let's go ahead and start wrapping up. I know, how can people get a hold of you? And do you have any, do you want to shout out your own company? And I know you had mentioned someone else that you wanted to bring up.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. My business is Paramerica LLC. My website is www.paramerica.us. That's PARAMERICA.us. You can email me, John, Jon, at paramerica.us. And I'm offering training throughout the summer months in, what's a word that I'm looking for? Hartford, Wisconsin. And I'm also throughout the winter months interested in like doing destination training and traveling to like other places when it gets too cold in Wisconsin to train. So if anyone's interested in that, I obviously love to talk about paramotors, and I'd love to talk your ear off about the training process. So feel free to reach out to me. And I also wanted to give a shout out to my friend, Todd Scandrett, who is a medically retired Army artillery officer. And Todd's story is pretty interesting. He started a business, a nonprofit, 401c3 nonprofit called Resurgence PPG. And he really started it as a way to provide paramotor training scholarships to military veterans, as a way to use the transformative power of the sport in a way to like overcome whatever life challenge that they're dealing with. And he started up this business before he even got paramotor training.
Oh, nice.
Kind of like he just knew that this was like something special and something really powerful and magical that could be used. Like we talked about before, like veterans get out of the military and they now have this giant hole that needs to be filled with something. And what he's done is really awesome. He's set up a network of a lot of really good dudes with military experiences. Some of them have been deployed, some of them are pilots, some of them weren't. Some of them, have injuries that they've had to overcome. They've trained an amputee before. So he really uses Resurgence PPG as like a really powerful transformative tool in this. So I'd also recommend to any veterans listening to this podcast to go to resurgencepppg.com as well and learn a little bit about their program, because Todd's doing awesome things with it. So. Sweet,
man. I'll drop both of those website links into the show description so people can check those out. My website's jcreamergraphics.com. My Instagram is @formeractionguys and @formeractionnews. Check those out. hit me up and make sure to subscribe and tell your friends. Thanks again, man. I appreciate you coming on.
Hey, it was an honor. I really appreciate you having me. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, dude.